Well, this is a fun one. Of the TNG episodes that I remember most vividly, this one. Oh, I'm going to get to that later. But this is the sort of episode that using this in a TTRPG setting, you could um throw this in because of it's one of those things like, yes, remember that you were part of this thing back before then, and oh yeah, now we do this other thing. Be you know Unless your character's fresh out of academy or something, you kind of sort of have a backstory that probably hasn't been filled in fully yet. And that was the entire thing they did with this episode in the TV show. Fill in backstory for Geordie LaForge. No, seriously, it's like when you read the behind the scenes commentary, that's actually what Brannon Braga intentionally did with this, was use this to uh, fill in Geordie LaForge backstory. Because, see, Timothy DeHaas actually didn't write Geordie LaForge as one of the main characters in this. He was writing it as a problem that the crew of the Enterprise needed to deal with, but that they didn't have one of their crew as one of those affected by the alien whatever contamination. And that is a large part of what makes this one so memorable in the finished work, is that they do. It becomes an, "Oh, no, we need to save Geordi," instead of just leaving people like, "Oh, no, they got contaminated by some alien, thingy. We'll have to, study them from a distance safely." Nope. Instead, they go way deep into, "We have to save Geordi because Geordi is going to get turned into a frog monster." And that's an interesting thing about this episode, is that, as written, getting turned into one of the Tarchanin 3 life forms is kind of like being dead. I mean, your body's alive, but because it's a humanoid frog and not a frog shaped humanoid, you are no longer you. Once the transformation is complete, the transformed people lose the ability to think for themselves. They just become frogs. They think like frogs. And thus, that's something you genuinely want to avoid. And that's like the great tragic aspect of this episode, the um ominous foreshadowing aspect of this episode, is that they know that infected people will for all practical purposes, die. And they want to avoid having that happen to Giordi. Granted, in the end, they only managed to save two of the people that are affected by this, but uh, eventually they figure it out and save at least two of them. Now, part of what makes this episode so memorable is this scene right here. This is a holodeck simulation using recorded stuff from when Geordie LaForge was on the planet in the original incident, when he and several other Starfleet crew members got infected. And he realizes that there's a shadow out of place that doesn't logically make sense. He didn't see anyone there. And in the recordings, you don't see anyone standing there, but there's a shadow of a person who's not there. And this gray outline is the computer um, attempting to approximate the outline of whatever was making the shadow. This is actually one of the most clever uses of the holodeck they ever did, because they're doing an investigation and they're reconstructing the scene of the incident in the holodeck. And that reconstruction takes on a life of its own because of the fact that they learn things from it that they weren't expecting to learn. And looking at the data from this perspective gives them the ability to safely interact with the surface of Tarchanin in ways that they hadn't done before, and also avoid getting infected. Because, well, we already explained why that's a bad thing. Oh boy. Yeah. Tarchanin, one of those places that getting marked off limits is a good idea. Granted, it's not a guarantee that you're going to die if you go there, but odds are unfortunately high. Anyway, so the story as written is that um these people are looking at sensor logs of from just kind of sort of at random. It's like they were investigating the disappearance of colonists on the Tarchanin 3 outpost. The other members of the away team have they're um looking at the logs because of the fact that Gravel, Mendez, and Hickman, who were also at this thing, had suddenly gone missing and they don't know where they went or why. And the only thing they know is that one of them was seen on a shuttle going back to Tarchanin. And now Geordie LaForge and Leiston must figure out what the heck is going on because, quite frankly, the whole thing is scary and they don't know what the heck is going on either. Now, Leighton is one of those things where it's a character that gets introduced and um, kind of sort of played by two different actresses because, there's the actual actress who actually plays the character and someone who's a stand in for a few scenes. But the whole stand-in thing actually it takes up more space than it probably should have. Whatever. Anyways, um, but yeah, this was a character that only shows up in this episode, and due to the traumatic events of this episode, you could write a whole lot of different things about her. Now, one thing about this episode that's interesting is that they didn't go into the idea of what happens if someone's DNA gets into a halfway transformed state. Because as they show in this episode, there is a halfway transformed state where you still have the ability to think like a person and have weird demi frog powers too. And one of the things that I personally pondered about this episode a lot is that a Federation science team studying the DNA of these Tarchanin 3 life forms could presumably give people the ability to imitate them. But let's look into what that actually is. So, Tarchanin 3 is a jungle world, jungle slash swamp world. Now, it does not have a sentient population, possibly because of the fact that um, the parasite, whatever effect, has been causing everyone who is a sentient species to devolve into the creatures. Yeah, those aren't actually. Nope, that's not actually a link either. So many junk links. Okay. Well, here we are. This is the holographic simulation where it is creating an outline of what was casting a shadow, despite the fact that no one being able to actually see the shadow or what cast the shadow. And, well, one thing that's noteworthy though is that ultraviolet light is not affected by their invisibility thingy, apparently. And swinging around a flashlight emitting an ultraviolet light beam actually lets you see them because it causes them to glow like this whenever they're exposed to ultraviolet light beams. Notably, on the surface of Tarchanin, due to the dense overfoliation of the planet, good luck finding natural sources of ultraviolet light because the ground is almost completely in shadow on Tarchanin due to the dense vegetation. You could, of course, presumably find some places that did actually have sunlight, but they're few and far between, and the creatures are going to avoid them. This is actually one thing that's noteworthy is that one of the original ideas for this is involved the crew having to fight off the transformed colonists. Because, as we mentioned, is that there were 49 people on the Federation outpost. All 49 of them, and those three guys that Geordi and Lycan are looking for, got turned into these creatures. That's a grand total of 52 people who they might have ended up having to fight. Instead, the creatures are actually not particularly aggressive. That's the interesting quirk with the way they are in the finished episode. They're very much kind of, like uh live and let live sort of creatures. It's like they're not trying to kill you. It's just that their life cycle involves infecting people with something that will more or less kill them. But they're not going to, rip your head off because if they rip your head off, you won't get turned into one of them. Which, yeah, they exploit the fact that they're very hard to see, so they just, hide in shadows and stuff like that. And this one here was actually watching Giordi. That was what freaked Giordi out about this scene is that he's like, wait a second, there was a shadow here. Something was watching me. What was it? Hmm. In the case of humans, apparently it takes up to 5 years for the transformation to actually work. Again, the Federation established a proper colony on this planet before having people start getting transformed like this. Which we saw in the pictures is that you see the colony buildings in this area. Anyway, though, here's an example of cells. And remember what I said about frog-like? Well, yeah, you know, poses and stuff. What these cells are supposed to be, I have no idea. It's one of those things where sci-fi authors like, oh, well, this is what a normal cell looks like. This is what the alien monster cells look like. And draws something that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Dun dun dum. Yeah, the whole like rewriting the DNA of the patient thing is a very, very strange concept. However, it's not the only time Star Trek has done this. Things involving rewriting people's DNA in Star Trek is surprisingly common. I mean, let's just look at Barclay's protomorphosis syndrome. It's a contagious disease that causes people to devolve into um, things that aren't entirely sapient anymore. That's weird, to say the least. But yeah, lizard frog things. Anyway, though, so writing this in TTRPG. Caught, um, one thing you could do with this is having a party have to investigate people going to Tarchanin. Which, okay, yes, that's the simple, obvious thing. but you would have to throw in a quirk to it to make it interesting so that they're not just, reenacting this because the whole reason this worked in the episode is that no one had seen this before. If you set it after someone has seen this, then you need to make it in some way more interesting in order to um, spice things up a bit. Because let's face it, having a planet be marked as a restricted zone is something that would attract attention, and having people look up the reason why the planet's restricted, especially after Starfleet went to this much work to build a colony on it, would catch attention. Yeah, whatever. And having someone who is, shall we say, ethically questionable. Um, oh yeah, this scene here is like planet as being a world of perpetual twilight. As I noted before, to me, the perpetual twilight, what you see it. You really do see the perpetual twilight things. Like nothing, no view of the planet's surface is ever brightly lit. None of them. And my read of this was actually just that the planet has extremely dense vegetation covering everything. I'm not sure that's what the people intended, but it's my impression of it. You could possibly do a different take on it because looking at this picture in intense detail, more detail than is natural, this actually doesn't look like a jungle world. My impression of the planet from watching the episode was that it was a jungle world, but it could just be that the uh, region that they were building the colony was someplace that has more vegetation than most, or it could be using the alien biology idea and deciding that due to the spectral frequencies of this system's sun being different than out of Earth, the plants aren't green. You can totally go with that one. That actually is a viable option. I'm not sure what the episode writers were actually thinking. Yes, I read some of their notes, and I it's one sentence. Well, anyways, but yeah, perpetual twilight. The planet, nothing on the surface is brightly lit. To be honest, though, a story about someone trying to exploit the strange nature of the Tarchanan three life forms and do unethical things using their strange powers, that has serious merit because the Federation had to. Okay, there is, of course, that whole ultraviolet limitation. And if they were to walk around in certain environments, they would not have invisibility because of the fact that, well, if they were to walk around in daylight on Earth, they would be visible because of the fact that Earth's sun has enough ultraviolet radiation to mess up their camouflage ability. I know, for a sci fi race that's a super alien, it's a surprisingly limited version of a super alien. Their cloaking effect is nearly complete on Tarchanan. Other places, it's not necessarily a perfect invisibility. That's something you could have a lot of fun with because, there's the whole idea. It's like, oh, they have five people on the away team mission. They felt the need to return to Tarchanan because something returned to the spawning ground or something. Well, what if they didn't make it? What if the degeneration process um caused them to lose the ability to return before they actually got back? They still want to return, but they don't remember how. That would be interesting. Having them somewhere else. That's something you could have a lot of fun with. Because again, as an episode, this really was a particularly fun episode due to the whole um what's the best way to put it? Investigation aspect. They spend a lot of time investigating. And due to actually, you know what? That reminds me of something. There is a conspicuous absence in this episode. I think the people writing it either intentionally omitted her or just plain forgot. But if you look at the notes on this episode, Deanna Troy does not show up in this episode. At no point in this episode do you see a telepath interact with the Tarchanan 3 life forms. I'm not certain whether this is an intentional um, omission or if it's an accident, but having Deanna Troy sense the Tarchanan 3 life forms would presumably make it a lot easier because, you have a telepath be like, oh, yeah, there's an invisible person standing over there. I mean, seems obvious. And in Star Trek Adventures, yeah, telepathic races are surprisingly common because telepathy is cool or something. Honestly, telepathy is seen in the TV show as something extremely useful. So players choosing to play as telepathic races isn't a rarity at all. Anyway, though, but yeah, is Legend um going a bit insane and starting to devolve and getting hauled off to sick bay before she can jump on down to the planet was something that I think is a plot point that you could have a lot of fun with if you were to go with this. It's like people tried to steal stuff from Tarchanin uh, and got infected, and oh wait, now they're going insane. Yeah, it's not a given that people who get infected by this will actually get back to Tarchanin in order to um, actually complete the metamorphic cycle. They might instead end up like Lightskin, getting transformed, but being like locked up in sick bay or something. Now, the episode starts with two or three people. Oh, Ravel, Mendez, and Hickman, who deserted their posts and went back to Tarchanin, and yeah, no one ever actually saw them again. Do we even have pictures of what they look like? I think we did, because I remember I think there was a flashback. This is presumably Gravel as a transformed character, completely unrecognizable in the alien makeup. Oh, and it has a different guy playing the mutated form anyway. So yeah, good luck with that. They were such minor characters that they were functionally extras. Like seriously. However, that is not to say they weren't, something that you could tinker with. Because let's face it, if you're writing your own take on this, have fun trying to save them. You know, that's a good plot hook. It's like you have people who are infected by the Tarchanan parasites, and now you need to save them. Oh, hey, they even talked about his wife and kids. That's unfortunate for them. Dun dun dun. Oh, and Hickman's shuttle apparently crashed. He got turned into a frog thing before he actually finished his trip and just crashed. Oh boy. Also, the guy who played him, if he looks like Ian Troy, it's because it's the same guy, apparently. Hmm. Well, then. Anyways, so yeah, there's my thoughts on this one. As super alien episodes go, this is a very, very interesting episode because of the whole like were creature aspect of it. And also the fact that completing the transformation into a were creature means that you're no longer a sentient life form. That really sucks. And it also gives this episode a major danger factor. We really don't want to have people get infected with these or, transformed because that reason. Pity. Anyway, though, yeah, really fun episode idea and something that you could tinker with a lot because I'm actually kind of pondering what I would do if I was to actually like write a scenario based on this because uh I would want to flavor this so that it would make sense for the party involved. And also, it's like unanswered question here is how the Tarchanan 3 life forms show up on telepathic scans. I would imagine the fully transformed ones, because of the fact that they think like animals, would not be picked up by telepaths in a way that is disparate from sensing an animal. So a telepath might not realize that it's a being there. Might be like, oh, it felt like there was a frog watching me. Because being watching you has the intellect of a frog. Which, like I said before, that's what makes this scary. Getting turned into something with the intellect of a frog. Don't want that. At any rate, oh yeah, this is one of the USS Victory episodes. Why? Good question. It's not actually used all that much. But this is the ship that Geordie was on when he went to Tochannon to get infected. Alrighty then. Well, see you guys later.